Okay, we'll start with this. Well, on the heels of Oscar Valdez's big win at 130 pounds over Miguel Berchelt, the then longest reigning champion at that weight, the usual suspects are up to their usual suspicious activity. Leonard Ellaby retweeted a tweet referencing a potential match between Gervonta Davis and Oscar Valdez, to which Leonard Ellaby responded, "Hold up. Leo is far more accomplished than Valdez, but he was too small, right? Valdez comes from 26, but he's not too small? Which narrative is it? Can't have it both ways, by the way. Tank would knock him the fuck out."
Oh.
Fabulous.
Yeah, gee, wasn't expecting that.
I don't know if this was a vain attempt at humor or perhaps sarcasm. I don't really know what Leonard was trying to accomplish with this comment. I don't really know what point he was trying to get across, because while Oscar Valdez is the naturally smaller fighter in the fight, Oscar's the one who won the fight.
Not Miguel.
What the hell does that have to do with Leo Santa Cruz and Gervonta Davis?
I don't actually know.
Oscar was the one taking all the risks. Oscar was the underdog in the fight.
I could see if it was Miguel Berchelt that won.
I could see if it was Miguel Berchelt that scored a devastating knockout and was receiving praise for it, as opposed to criticism, the kind of criticism that Gervonta Davis faced for knocking out Leo Santa Cruz. I could see if it was Miguel that won because Oscar is the naturally smaller fighter, but that's not what happened. Oscar knocked Miguel out.
And Oscar was the little guy.
I mean, I don't really know what point Leonard was trying to make. I don't know what point he was trying to get across. I don't know what the man was trying to say. Was he trying to imply that there's some kind of double standard here? Well, that hierarchy of thought only applies if the naturally bigger man wins the fight, not the smaller man.
Yeah, I don't think Leonard thought this through.
I think what he was trying to imply, I think what he was trying to insinuate, is that there's a double standard at work here. But that only applies if the naturally bigger man wins the fight.
If Miguel would have knocked out Oscar the way that Gervonta knocked out Leo.
I don't know, then maybe he would have had a point. Gervonta Davis himself tweeted, "I will tuck him in like a baby."
No, you won't.
Don't confuse that with a fight prediction, folks, because in order for there to be a fight prediction, there has to be a fight.
Right?
That's my point. There isn't going to be one.
How many times have we been here before?
What, now Valdez versus Davis is going to be a thing? We're going to do with Valdez versus Davis what we've already been doing with Davis versus Lomachenko, or Davis versus Farmer, or even Davis versus Berchelt. God knows they reigned in the division at the same time.
As champions.
And Gervonta never so much as sneezed in that guy's direction. Never looked in the direction of Masayoshi Ito. Never looked in the direction of the guy that beat Masayoshi Ito. Jamel Herring never fought Andrew Cancio. Never fought Alberto Machado or Jezreel Corrales before him.
I don't think he's going to fight the winner of Rakamal versus Ogawa.
I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Gervonta Davis goes his entire career and never fights Teofimo Lopez. Never fights Devin Haney.
Never.
I don't know, maybe he fights Ryan Garcia, but those guys' egos are so big it wouldn't surprise me if they never fought either. You want to know what I really think this is? I think these guys are trying to ride Oscar's wave. Oscar made some waves with his big win over Miguel Berchelt, and what these guys are doing is getting a boogie board. We're seeing who did it better comparisons between Gervonta Davis's knockout of Leo Santa Cruz and Oscar Valdez's knockout of Miguel Berchelt, when those situations are hardly comparable. Oscar Valdez beat a guy that was favored to beat him. Oscar was the underdog in the Berchelt fight. Gervonta Davis wasn't the underdog in the Leo Santa Cruz fight. Moreover, Oscar was the naturally smaller guy who took on the naturally bigger guy, whereas we all know that Leo Santa Cruz was hardly a super featherweight. He really only had one fight there.
Flores.
We know he wasn't a natural super featherweight. What's the big deal in Gervonta Davis knocking out a guy who moved up several weight classes and capped off at super featherweight? How is that the same thing?
Davis was the naturally bigger guy.
And Davis was the guy favored to win. Where's the comparison in there? Where's the parallel?
Where?
A lot of people thought that Oscar Valdez was going to suffer his first knockout loss at the hands of Miguel Berchelt. Myself included, and the bookies.
Thought he'd lose.
A little bit of late money aside, Oscar Valdez was the underdog with the bookkeepers ahead of this match. I wouldn't go comparing Oscar Valdez taking on a naturally bigger fighter who was favored to beat him with Gervonta Davis taking on a naturally smaller fighter that he was favored to beat.
They're trying to ride his wave.
It's marketing if it's anything, folks. Anything happening at around either 130 or 135 pounds, anything noteworthy is anything that they are so going to attach themselves to, even though ultimately it won't result in a fight. That's the part of it I take issue with. I take no issue with a world champion at 130 pounds, like Gervonta Davis, wanting to face another world champion at that same weight. I take no issue with that, so long as the intention is to make a fight. But with these guys, you know that's not what's going to happen.
The guy's 26 years old, and they talk about him like he still pees and shits himself.
He's a two-time world champion in the super featherweight division, and he is in possession of a lesser title in the lightweight division. But if you ask these guys, he's still wet behind the ears. He still needs somebody to hold his hand across the street.
Across the street?
I forgot. Crossing the street is a four-letter word on PBC Island. That'll never happen. Because, Gervonta Davis, he's the A-side. He's the A-side to everybody from 130 to 135 pounds. He's the A-side who doesn't seem to send anybody any fucking offers. If Gervonta Davis is so confident that he would tuck in Oscar Valdez like a baby, and Leonard Ellerby shares in that sentiment, he has a lot of confidence in his boy. If that's how those guys feel, them being the A-side in all of this, when are they going to pony up the cash? When are they going to send Oscar an offer? If that's how you really feel about it, and you're the A-side, like you say you're the A-side, why don't you cook up a term sheet, cook up a contract, send it over to Oscar, and see if it's to his liking? Because if you guys are the A-side the way you say you're the A-side, the offers are supposed to be coming from you.
So that works, isn't it?
You've been hearing about how Gervonta Davis is the A-side to everybody for the last, 3-4 years. He's a superstar. He's a pay-per-view attraction. But how many actual offers has this superstar, this pay-per-view attraction, sent out to all these guys from 130 to 135? If he's the A-side to Teofimo, and he's the A-side to Devin Haney, he's the A-side to a Jamel Herring, he's certainly the A-side to a Jojo Diaz. I'm pretty sure they'd say he's the A-side to Oscar Valdez as well. And if he's the A-side to all of these fucking guys, how many offers has he made to all these fucking guys?
I don't think he's made offers to any of those guys.
I don't think he's about to. What I think is about to happen is more creative matchmaking on PBC Island. That's just it. If you're not going to fight any of these fucking guys at or around 130 or 135 pounds, according to Gervonta Davis, his next fight isn't going to be at either of those weights.
He said it.
If that's the case, then you don't really need to be worrying about what Oscar Valdez is doing, are you? You're saying you'd put the guy to sleep, but you and I both know you're not going to fight him. Gervonta Davis might go his entire career and not fight the likes of an Oscar Valdez, and the same is true with a lot of other fighters campaigning at or around these weights. So what's the fucking point in talking about fights that you and I both know aren't going to happen?
Clout chasing.
Because that's what Gervonta and Leonard are really doing. They're clout chasing Oscar. Now, in relation to this story, in reference to Oscar Valdez, TV Boxeo posted this image on their Instagram account. They're essentially saying they'd like to see, an Oscar Valdez versus Leo Santa Cruz fight.
Yeah, that'll happen.
Once upon a time, this is a fight that made a lot of sense, but that was back when both Oscar and Leo were at featherweight, when they were at 126. I believe that Leo Santa Cruz will be going back there very soon, as he still holds the WBA title there. In spite of also having held the WBA title at 130 and subsequently losing it to Gervonta Davis, better still, the WBA is going to WBA.
Hey.
That's another matter entirely. I don't know that this fight even makes sense at this point. Did these guys not see Leo Santa Cruz get cold slept by Gervonta Davis? And did they not just see Oscar Valdez cold sleep Miguel Berchelt?
You miss it?
What makes them think that this fight is a possibility? What makes them think this fight could happen anytime in the near future?
Leo hasn't even rebounded off the loss to Gervonta yet.
I don't even think that Leo Santa Cruz is going to stay in the 130-pound division, though even if he did, the politics of boxing in and of themselves have to be reconciled. Did they forget that Leo Santa Cruz is a PBC fighter?
You think Al and Bob is swapping souffle recipes?
Call me crazy, but I don't think those guys are on each other's Christmas cards.
Ain't bosom buddies.
How many fights has the rift between the people at Top Rank and the PBC? How many fights have not happened as a result of that rift? So that here today, as Leo is coming off of a knockout loss, you can start asking for Valdez versus Santa Cruz. Let me tell you something. If this fight ever made any sense at all, it's when Oscar held the WBO title at 126 pounds and when Leo held the WBA title.
At that same weight.
That fight has reached its sell-by date. That fight is cold product. And even if it weren't, even if that were still a fight that the fight fans are demanding,
Are they?
the politics of boxing in it of themselves would prevent the fight from happening. I don't know what's with boxing fans these days, playing dumb and pretending like this stuff isn't happening, like these political boundary lines aren't there. They are there.
As far as the PBC is concerned, they are.
We were talking about a Golden Boy Promotions fighter and a Top Rank fighter, or a Matchroom fighter, a Queensbury Promotions fighter, a Duco Events fighter. I mean, if we were talking about any other fighter and a top-ranked fighter, now you're cooking with rice.
You are.
Then maybe the fight can happen. But Leo Santa Cruz is a PBC fighter until further notice. For God's sake, he named one of his kids after Al Heyman.
Alejandro Jamón.
What the fuck are you, deaf?
What are you, daft?
This fight ain't gonna fucking happen. It's like I told you before. Oscar Valdez, in all likelihood, is going to take on the winner of Frampton versus Herring or Shakur Stevenson. Perhaps in that order, perhaps not. But either way you slice it, those are the likeliest opponent options for Oscar Valdez once he returns to the ring. What's in his immediate future, his more immediate future, is a little bit of R&R, because he just took out a guy that everybody thought was going to take him out, and he earned it.
He earned his money.
And the rest in relaxation that it affords him.
I don't even know if Leo Santa Cruz has woken up yet.
Woken up from what?
The uppercut Javante hit him with.
I'm expecting the name of Oscar Valdez to get thrown around quite a bit in the next couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months. I'm expecting that Oscar Valdez is a name that a lot of guys are going to name drop in the very near future. But as it stands, the likeliest opponent options for Oscar are either the winner of Frampton versus Herring or Shakur Stevenson.
You're a wide-eyed optimist expecting him to fight PBC fighters.
That is, you'd have to be a wide-eyed optimist to believe that PBC fighters are actually going to fight with him. I'm sure that Oscar, given the courageous display that he put on this past weekend, is pretty much open to fighting any one of these guys that want a piece of him. It's these other guys using his name. It's their intentions that I question.
Leonard and Javante.
I question that, and I question the mental faculties of anyone who's proposing here today in 2021 a fight between Leo Santa Cruz, who still hasn't rebounded off the loss to Javante, Leo versus Oscar.
What?
What, do you live under a rock?
That shit ain't gonna happen.
And finally, there seems to be trouble in paradise in reference to the proposed Gennady Golovkin versus Jaime Munguia fight per tweet from Salvador Rodriguez. If the next week is not defined what Triple G Boxing and Jaime Munguia are going to do, cannot Islam in April. But let it be clear that if it is not done, it was Triple G who did not want the fight, not Jaime, per Fernando Beltran, guy over there at Zanford Promotions. Guy holds a lot of weight. It's the funniest thing about that Jaime Munguia fight, because I think it's a fight of some sizable value, depending on when you stage it.
Yeah.
I think an underlying issue that perhaps is not immediately visible on the surface is that, Gennady Golovkin versus Jaime Munguia, that's the kind of fight that you'd want to stage on Cinco de Mayo or Cinco de Mayo weekend, but it just so happens that that's supposed to be the time that Canelo Alvarez takes on Billy Joe Saunders. Could that scheduling issue, clashing with the Canelo Alvarez fight date, could that be the reason that the wheels have slowed in reference to this proposed match between Gennady Golovkin and Jaime Munguia?
You could always stage it on a Friday.
Let Canelo Alvarez fight Billy Joe Saunders on Saturday, provided that Canelo makes it past Avni Yildirim, though, if I'm being honest, most of us think he will. That'd be a pretty good packaged deal, wouldn't you say? Golovkin versus Munguia on a Friday, Canelo Alvarez versus Billy Joe Saunders on a Saturday, Cinco de Mayo weekend. The feeling is that if Gennady Golovkin versus Jaime Munguia talks have slowed, it's because the Golovkin people are pulling away from that fight and moving towards a Murata showdown, what would now be a unification match, because Murata has been elevated to full WBA middleweight champion. The part about that that's hard to reconcile is I don't actually believe that they would thrust Murata into that situation straight away, because Murata hasn't had a fight since December of 2019. This guy's been inactive for over a year. I don't think that Gennady Golovkin is going to be the first guy that he fights in his comeback fight.
His last fight was against Stephen Butler.
I mean, you don't go from fighting Stephen Butler over a year ago to fighting Gennady Golovkin over a year later. That's not how you do it. They'd be setting the kid up to fail.
He needs a tune-up fight.
Don't misunderstand me. I think some effort is going to go into Golovkin versus Murata. I think it's a fight that both parties are receptive to, just not straight away. Not when Murata hasn't fought anybody in over 12 months. I can see these two guys fighting each other later on this year, but that would have to be after Murata gets a tune-up fight. So who does Gennady Golovkin fight in the in-between time? Because the Jaime Munguia people are talking about fighting Kanat Islam.
The Andrade versus Williams fight is done.
There's too many politics associated with the Jermall Charlo fight. I don't even really know if I believe that Jermall wants that fight so much as he wants to keep using Gennady Golovkin's name.
Has he been using his name?
I don't know. I vaguely recall him telling David Benavidez to get a COVID shot. I don't know what the hell that guy's gearing up to do. The name of Chris Eubank Jr. comes to mind. Chris Eubank Jr., who very recently departed from PBC Island and docked on the shores of Sarland City. With Sarland Promotions now. Sarland, who has a very good working relationship with the people over there at Matchroom. Given Chris Eubank Jr.'s change in ambiance, maybe he's a guy that Gennady Golovkin could fight perhaps in the United Kingdom, in front of an audience, assuming the crowds come back.
Context is key, folks.
The only reason that Chris Eubank Jr. seems like a likely opponent option here today at this point in the juncture is because things sound like they're not working out with Jaime, and I don't believe that Ryota Murata and his people would put him in the Golovkin fight straight away. In a situation like that, suddenly, a guy like Chris Eubank...
That makes a little bit of sense.
In that situation, that particular situation to where things aren't working out with Jaime, but Ryota Murata doesn't seem all that likely, not yet. We know there's a lot of politics involved with a Charlo fight, and we don't even know that Charlo really wants it. In a situation like that, Chris Eubank Jr. and the interest that he's already expressed, well, that makes him a possible candidate. And depending on what's going on over there in the United Kingdom, what's the situation with COVID? Are they allowing crowds to attend fights? How long is it going to take to get some stability in that department? Golovkin versus Eubank Jr. could, in theory, do good business. It's not because Chris Eubank Jr. is some kind of big celebrity over there. He isn't. But if you tack on the name of Gennady Golovkin to the name of Chris Eubank Jr., now you're cooking with rice. Depending on the circumstances, I could see a fight like that doing very good business in the United Kingdom. I'll say that the fight is an intriguing fight, though it really is no substitute for a Golovkin versus Andrade fight per se.
Unification.
Currently, I view Demetrius Andrade as one of the stiffer tests for Gennady Golovkin to unify a title at that weight. And perhaps that's the reason that you seldom ever hear Gennady Golovkin mention that guy. Quite honestly, I've never heard Gennady Golovkin mention that guy. He doesn't sneeze in his direction. For whatever reason, he just doesn't.
Right now, Chris Eubank Jr. is looking like a possibility.